All right, so let's spend a few words about La Poste. First of all, a question. Who's French in this room? Please raise your hand. Okay. Who knows La Poste? Oh,
the same.
Seems to be better. So Group La Poste is a major group in the French economy, as we can see on this slide, with 24 billion euros of revenue last year. And we are 250,000 employees. Okay. We've got 4 usual public service missions. We provide home mail delivery 6 days a week. We contribute to regional planning through the presence of postal service everywhere in France. We transport and deliver newspapers, and we program access banking for all through La Banque Postale. I know there is people from La Banque Postale in the room.
Raise your hand.
So the group is divided in 5 business units. First of all, La Banque Postale, in charge of banking activities and insurance. Digital services, branche numérique, in charge of our website, laposte.fr. What we called post offices, le réseau, in charge of all the retail points. Geopost, in charge of international express delivery. And of course, the services, mails and parcels business unit. I work for this business unit. So we had a big strategic plan to 2020, conquering the future. La Poste is going to change a lot until 2020. So let's focus on the business unit. We got 3 strong objectives. We have to be the reference partner for the e-commerce in France, but also in the world. We want to be a major player in urban logistics. And also, we want to be an actor for the development of local service and in-home services. Let's focus on the IT department. In a few words, we've got 130 projects. We've got 1,000 servers, 4 data centers. We will go back to these data centers hereafter. Okay. And of course, we are located in France. Now you know where France is. We are multi-site. We are in Paris, of course, in Limoges, in Châlons-en-Champagne, for example, in Montpellier, of course, in Nantes.
And investments. Les investissements.
Yes. As Jafar said, we are going to make a very, very big investment to change our information system, €500 million until 2020. So it's a very, very big challenge for us. Our information system is going to change to be ready to for tomorrow's, and the fact that the volume of mails is going to decrease. So we are going to change our information system. And so that's why we had a cloud strategy at the business unit, services, mails and parcels. We want to ease solving the problem of the obsolescence of our infrastructures and applications. We are running on obsolescent infrastructures using obsolescence middleware. We also want to accelerate the conquest of what we call new territories. In fact, it's new strategic applications with needs of rapid implementation. And we want also be a cloud provider for all the group La Poste. So we build what we call IT as a service at La Poste with an IaaS solution based on VMware vCloud Suite, a PaaS solution using OpenShift, and we also have an offer of physical machines for other workloads like appliance, etc. So we start in July, roughly 3 years ago, in 2015, by building our IaaS solution. As I told you before, it's based on the VMware vCloud Suite. And in October, we start working on a PaaS solution based on OpenShift 3.0. So we built first a test platform, and in January 2016, we opened for build purpose for the project, and in May for run purpose. The service that we offer are totally out-of-the-box services without any customization, with the use of editor standards and editor solution out of the box as they come. So 2 years ago, we had to set a new dynamic for the project. So we built what we called the IT Service Task Force. It's a kind of IT department inside of the IT department. As I used to say, a standalone, multi-seat, multi-skills team with DevOps structure. We implement agile methodology with 3 goals. First of all, we want to re-platform our totally obsolescent legacy environments. But the IT Service Task Force is also in charge to continue to operate these apps. Then we had to help new strategic and new business apps to be deployed onto the IT service platform. And then we had to maintain new offers and follow new evolution of the tools we are using from editors. We build a CI/CD platform. If you've been at other presentation during this summit, it's like every CI/CD platform with the use of Jenkins, GitLab, Selenium. We also have SonarQube, Checkmark, HP Quality Center for testing. So by the end of 2017, we had 2 OpenShift clusters, one for build purpose, one for run purpose. Installed, and the OpenShift nodes are installed and configured over the IaaS solution. The IaaS solution is also used for databases workload. Databases are deployed on the IaaS solution like MySQL, Postgres. And we also have 2 management log stack, one for the build, one for the run, implementing classical thing with Elasticsearch or /Kibana and so on. One focus on the reporting we set up onto our platform. So we provide security compliance reporting for the management. Every week, this kind of report are on the wall of the CEO directly. And it's very, very important to follow the security upgrades and to not reproduce what we've done with the legacy platform. So project has to follow evolutions of software, upgrades. They have to be up to date every time something is released by the editors. For the PaaS, we developed the script. We used UC client to collect information, to compare with the application image version used by the project, to compare with what is the reference in terms of security. For the IaaS, we extract this information from Red Hat Satellites, Use Manager, Landscape, WSOS, and everything is correlated with our CMDB and compared to the latest version available. And as a friend of mine says, everything always finishes in Excel. So for the metrics we set up, we use Grafana Suite. We historize OpenShift metrics. We collect other metrics provided by infrastructure services, by middleware databases like VMware, Java, Cassandra. We produce dashboard to monitor everything in order to analyze the activity of our environments. For the PaaS, we use Hipster for default OpenShift metrics. We have a standalone Hipster for sending metrics to Graphite. And also Diamond is used to collect metrics system like node CPU, memory usage, disk usage. And we send them to Graphite. We have different and multiple vision of the consumption of our resources. We will have an example by application, by node, a top 5, a top 10. And for EIS, we have monitoring of the consumption, and we can compare with the resources available and what the project really used. So for example, here we have an example of our dashboard, one for the OCP cluster and the other for the VMware cluster. These dashboards are also in the office of the CEO every week. We can have metrics per application, so we can have a complete application view. We can have a top 5 or top 10, just to compare and to analyze who is consuming a maximum of resources. So last year, we had about 50 apps running onto our IT as a service platform, business apps, strategic apps, and we still have a platform growing, evolving from 3.0 to 3.5 OCP. We had new services, just like Varnish, Elasticsearch, Node.js, Cassandra. And we provide to project new tools, as I show you with Elasticsearch, Log/Kibana, ELK, Grafana. For the project teams, there are more changes. For example, testing and automated testing is mandatory. If they come to our IT as a service platform, it's mandatory. It's impossible to deploy an application onto our as a service platform if you don't have any automated test. They use those tests to do their upgrade and to follow the version we put in production of software from software vendors. Last year, we decided to set up 2 new data centers. So it's a big challenge. For those 2 data centers, one thing, they have to be fully independent. They have to be completely isolated. So we can change one data center by another one if we change of provider, for example. The only thing we guarantee is a low latency network between those 2 data centers. We use Cisco ACI for those 2 data centers, and we use the same CI/CD platform to deploy onto our primary data center and onto the new data centers. Only we play with tags to deploy where we want. So it looks like that. You've got our first data center named DC1, 2-room data center with replication of storage between the 2 rooms. And we've got, at the bottom of the page, now 2 new data centers, X and Y, completely isolated, independent. And at the right, you can see we also have a public cloud provider on which we install an OpenShift cluster used for testing purpose by the moment, but we can use this OpenShift for other needs if necessary. Constructing a data center or set up a data center is a very complicated task. So we had more than 10 pizza teams with 8 up to 15 people per pizza team. So it's big pizza. So we use the SAFE framework to synchronize the work of every pizza team in order to set up the two data centers. SAFE stands for Scaled Agile Framework. It's a framework that allows you to extend agile principles and Scrum to synchronize multi-teams in order to produce something. So we do program increment planning. in the beginning of 5 2-week iterations. So this year, we will have to do 4 programming increment planning. Last one was in April. Next one is in June. Onto this new data center, we deploy enforced code, as everyone, with Ansible Tower, Ansible. It will be more clear with the next slide. For example, here we deploy, it's a sample to deploy a MySQL VM. So, as you can see, we use our various orchestrator in order to be standard whatever data center we use. It's the same varialized orchestrator that is used on the primary data center DC1, for example. But in this case, the intelligence is into Ansible Tower and Ansible with the Ansible playbook. So we call different playbook, for example, to set up the DNS, to have an IP address with our efficient IP, to set up our Bastion CyberArk to allow user to connect to the virtual machines. The root user is secured into CyberArk. We also configure the network into Cisco ACI. So then we deploy MySQL using an Ansible playbook. And then the VM is registered into Red Hat Satellite for the patch management operations. So let's just first speak about how we use and what are the principles of application deployment.
Thank you, Guillaume. So as we saw, there's a lot of automation going on to give as much flexibility to the end users. They're able to provision some infrastructure level services. But how do they with the applications? So one of the goals was to be able to deploy the applications on multiple clusters and to be able to deploy the applications in a seamless, repeatable way and not having to adapt it specifically for the needs of each cluster. So how do they do that? So I don't know if Guillaume mentioned that, but the first cluster was a 2-room data center where they had shared storage, replicated storage in there. But the new data centers are totally isolated. So we needed to have a way to deploy the applications and be able to target the data centers. So they have extended the existing Jenkins pipelines, and they are able to put some labels to say, I want to target this or that or all of those data centers, and then the application can be deployed on all of that. So there are some targeting labels that are used, and there's also this kind of logic to be able to expose the applications. Of course, one of the topics that you need to address when you want to have multiple clusters with applications running on them in an active mode, there are some topics that you need to address, like how will I manage synchronization, where will the data persistence be managed, and things like that. So you need to come up with some principles. Those can be some technical decisions that you standardize on, but they can also be organizational changes and architecture choices that you make. So how did that go within La Poste? So first thing is in a complete change of mindset, we wanted to have something different from traditional ways of handling these kind of topics. Traditionally, you would say, I want a database, and you provision, and someone would provision the database for you, will put in place the backup and restore processes and the synchronization if you want to have replication across different locations and stuff like that. We didn't want to have this kind of organization because then you are tied to the underlying infrastructure that you are using. So we wanted to have the applications who are fully responsible of the whole life cycle. So it's a mindset of you build it, you run it, and all we provide you is infrastructure where you can run your application. So for example, they have some stateless applications where those are very easy to deploy. There's no challenges in doing that. You deploy that on the 2 data centers, and it's not so much a problem. The problem is when you have stateful applications and you need to put data in some persistent backends and stuff like that. And there are some technologies, and each project will choose the kind of strategy that they want to use, but they are responsible of building that. So for example, they can choose to have some replicated, so they can have, for example, distributed caching using things like Redis, or they can put in place DB replications, but it's the project itself who is in charge of putting all those changes. But as you can see, they are providing them some catalogs to be able to deploy their services. But that way, you are sure that if you want to move your application from this kind of deployment to cloud providers, for example, the application itself and the project is able to do exactly the same, and they are not blocked because they were relying on some external services. So, as we mentioned, there is no infrastructure service or SLA to provide this kind of features. It's at the project level that is handled, and it's really a big change of mindset. But it gives you a lot of flexibility to be able to move around your applications. So the principle is, of course, that the application is deployed on 2 data centers, and we saw that there are some affinity rules that are used to be able to place the application appropriately. So the application on a data center will be configured to consume as much as possible services that are co-located with that to avoid unnecessary cross-data center communications. So I will show that in a diagram a bit later. And some applications cannot rely simply on internal communications. They need to expose some functionalities to the outside world, for example. And for that, we saw that there's an API solution that is in place that is deployed as containers, and they are able to deploy the gateways appropriately on the different data centers and have the configuration pushed into that. So the applications or those local instances in each data center are accessible through each data center. And of course, the principle is you have an external balancer that will balance the traffic across the different clusters. So how does that happen? We can see in this diagram. So for example, you have the application called My App, and it will be deployed in the 2 data centers, but it will have some specific information saying that it's running on DC X, and on the right side, it's running on DC Y. So the application knows on what data center it's running based on some tagging and stuff like that that is put in there. As I mentioned, we have the ability to expose the APIs through containers that can be also instantiated per project because they are running in containers. And you have a public API that is specific to this version of the application running on DCX, and same thing on the other side. Same thing for the APIs. The APIs are exposed through a specific URL for each data center, but on the outside, you have the global load balancer who has some internal rules to be able to direct the traffic to the appropriate data center. So basically, you have complete isolation between the data center. You don't need to have cross-replication and things like that. And if we go to the storage layer, we also have some automated provisioning on each of the data centers, and that's what we will cover in the next section. So each data center is, as I mentioned, completely isolated. There's no replication that can be used. So some people could rely on replication mechanisms that are used by cluster or things like that. But in that case, every cluster has its own instances of Gluster, and they are using replicatory to make the data highly available in each data center. So if a node breaks, we know that it's not a problem because it's going to be available through other storage. So that's it. And now Guillaume will speak about what has been achieved in 2008.
Thank you, Jafar. By now, we have about 63 apps running on our platform, mostly on our previous data center on DC1, but we are starting to deploy new apps onto the 2 new data centers on X and Y. We are still upgrading our platform. We are deploying 3.7 OpenShift. offering new services, just like Varnish, new tools, just like Ansible Tower, as we show, Red Hat Satellite, Nexus. And we have sets, quota, and limit sets for every project in the way to protect them for misconsumption of resources, with pod size like t-shirt size, S, medium, large, extra large. We have observed more changes for the project teams. As I told you, with the use of automated test, project can update their stack more easily. For example, and it's a real example, a few weeks ago, we had Drupal critical advice. So within a few hours, we updated 10 projects in production that would have been completely impossible before IT as a service. So that's a reality. That's the truth. André will talk about the collaboration with Red Hat.
So a few words about our collaboration. Well, one word is excellent. And one of the success criteria have been the sponsorship since the beginning of the project of one of the VPs in charge of the IT at La Poste, the production and infrastructure VP. So he strongly believed in the potential of OpenShift solutions, and he has allowed Guillaume to have enough budget and resources to do the project properly. And we had also the chance to have Guillaume and his team, very skilled, very highly motivated, and since the beginning they have accepted to perform the project in an agile mode, which was quite new for La Poste. And so we rapidly had success in the deployment, and then our consultants continue to work with Guillaume and his team at the pace of 4 days per month, except when there are new technologies like Gluster or Tower. We also did a lot of training, of course, and we continue to have a regular contact with our pre-sales team, with the brilliant Jafar and Yassine. We have also proposed very early, in an early stage to La Poste to have the TAM services, Technical Account Manager, because there were very critical applications to be run in this platform, and we couldn't afford to have big issues without the maximum reactivity. So the TAM is here to handle the tickets, to be proactive also, to give advice on the architecture, and to ensure that the whole stack would be supported in the long range by Red Hat. What we do also is regularly strategic meetings with management on both sides to align our strategy to perfectly understand La Poste strategy on the next period, and also to give the best view of our strategy to La Poste and have the best collaboration.
Thank you, André. Just to focus on the lesson we've learned since the beginning of this project. First of all, installing OpenShift it's not so complicated. It's only can be seen as a technical project. Needs good planning, good organization. Communication is one of the key to lead the change, because you have to change the way of people are thinking, are using tools. And it's too complicated to change a large number of people working at the same time on deploying, on developing, on adding new features on a solution. As I wrote it, customers and the project teams can have great expectations from the cloud, like elasticity and self-remediation. So it's, they have great expectations. At the beginning, we have done the replatforming of applications. So based on our work, we can draw this efficiency diagram. As you can see, we have been able to replatform up to 4 apps per month. And we have a 40 decrease of the necessary effort for the replatforming of these apps. Because we've learned how to do that. As you can see on the diagram, there is a zone called App Frozen Zone. As I told you, I'm working at La Poste. The frozen zone is during December, the end of November, December, and January, just because we are working for Santa Claus. So we hope and we are able to deliver parcels in time for Christmas time. And something very important is, yes, you can build a new data center with an agile method, with the synchronization of up to 10 teams, 10 pizza teams. For example, one for the network configuration, one for the deployment of the hardware, one for the deployment of the IaaS solution, one for the deployment of the PaaS solution. But it needs a lot of synchronization. And for example, the SAFE framework can help you to do this synchronization. Thank you for your attention. We hope you give us a 5-star survey. If you've got questions, we will try to answer. Oh. So, first.
You mentioned earlier that you do have multiple data centers, and there's no data replication going on in the back end. How do you keep the information for both data centers synced?
Yeah, so like we said, the replication matter is not, there's not a single way to do that. But if you attended some of the sessions, you have things like, I don't know if you heard about Debezium, which is a project that Red Hat is working on that allows you to transform some read or writes to a database into data streams. And then you can put these data streams to some Kafka or AMQ buses that you could send to push the replication to other clusters. You have also other technologies that could rely on, for example, in other entities in the group, they use Couchbase, for example, which has cross-cluster replication. So it depends. There's no single strategy to do this kind of things, but the important thing is it's the project itself who has, so there is connectivity. It's not that the data centers are not connected. They have low latency network between them. It's just that it's the responsibility of the application team to put in place the right technology to do the synchronization.
Yes.
Your API gateway that ran in a container for the public API access, were those containers running in the same project as the PaaS for that application? Or were they in a separate project or maintained by separate?
Yeah, so again, you have two different strategies that you could have. You can have a generic common gateway, but you also have the micro gateway pattern that you could use. So each application can also have the way it's going to expose itself to the outside. So it's both patterns. Having containers gives you a lot of flexibility in the way that you can deploy this kind of stuff. Deploying an API gateway, if you are doing it in a traditional way, would take ages. If you have to instantiate VMs and have to work on the networking and stuff like that, it's never going to give you the agility that you have with this kind of deployment patterns. So the current configuration is the dual room with a sort of stretched data center because it's a common cluster. But I don't think that for the data center, the new one, it was a choice, because it's really hard to have stretch deployment over cloud providers, for example, or stuff like that. It really gives you an additional layer of management that you need to address. So it wasn't a choice that was made at the beginning of the architecture.
Yes, we want to.
Well, the goal is to consider every data center as something that you could get rid of any day.
Yes.
If you put in place these kind of strategies, it's not something that could be done easily. Now with those kind of architectures, you could dispose of a data center and say, okay, I'm going to migrate everything that is in there on another data center. You basically have to deploy the applications and the infrastructures and point through GSLB to the new API points and things like that. So, you know, you have less ties to the underlying configurations between the two data centers.
The last question.
Strategy, yes, pour les images, pour aller du dev au prod.
Oh, okay, we do a source, S2I. Each time we change of environment. For us, the truth is in GitHub. So we build, we do multiple build of images for the project. One per environment. Sorry.
Yeah. So that's the current way that it has been set up. So of course, as you can see, they have been early adopters, OpenShift 3.0. So many things that have evolved. And when we are putting these new data centers, you also have to think about your registry strategies. How are you going to have one or set of centralized registries, or are you going to use registries that are independent and that you put synchronization strategies? So if you start building in every environment, it's not something that's going to scale for this kind of topologies. So yeah, in this new pattern, it's a bit different approach that will be taken. And we saw also that Red Hat with Quay also could offer some really interesting features. So there's also some stuff that could go in there.
Yes.
Yep.
So some VMware plays as well. So VRA, VRL. Do you also use the virtualization layer to host OpenShift on VMware, or what is that kind of?
Est-ce qu'on utilise des VM pour
Yes.
OpenShift?
Yes, sorry, I don't. OpenShift is deployed only on VM. Of course, there is a cost of VMware, but it's easier to manage, easier to deploy. So we've got VMware everywhere.
So even Gluster is deployed in,
Yes, even Gluster.
in VM. So
Yeah, I'm new scenario, so it's curious.
Yep.
Since you've been using this since 3.0, you've obviously done many upgrades.
Yes.
Do you do those live in place with no availability, or do you take them offline?
No, live in place.
Have you ever run into availability, small losses of availability while
No.
doing that?
No. It's done during the day.
There's no hiccup, you literally did your upgrade live, customer serving everything.
est-ce qu'il y avait des stratégies de backup avant de faire la mise à jour ou pas?
No.
Yeah, just one thing is, of course, there are two clusters as you saw. So there's the build and the run cluster. So the upgrade is, of course, tested in two instances, but we know then that it's going to be running in the run cluster, same as it did in the build cluster. So there are two instances.
Yes. Build and run cluster are configured the same way. The only thing is that on the run cluster, resources are guaranteed. You have one vCPU for one real CPU. It's the only difference. There is more consolidation on the build cluster. If you go, yes.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Last.
More of a culture question. You mentioned it was kind of a change in thought for the application teams to do their API differently. Do you find that there's legacy teams or legacy apps that just don't fit that model today or don't have a plan to fit that model in the future? And how do you handle those?
Legacy apps are just replatformed. They project teams most of the time have disappeared, and there is only one ops in charge of a large bunch of apps. So we dedicated an external team to replatform those apps. Only replatforming. We've got a code rewrite maybe in a few years for these apps. But it's mostly apps with no more evolutions, no more new versions. It's only a gain of money because we were on obsolescent platform with a very, very old version of VMware tools, VMware suites, of databases versions. So the gain is here. Yes. In fact, the two new data centers will be able to accept the workload we have now on DC1, because DC1 will have to disappear, to be dismantled within a few years. So we plan to move once again our apps from DC1 to DCX and Y. So there is DCX and Y are completely similar by now. They have the same resources. They will have the same resources doing active applications, but also only active on one DC applications. So there is no differences. No. Databases run outside on the IaaS solution on VM. MySQL and PostgreSQL databases run on a VM. There is no databases on a CP cluster.
And so we're going to take one last question there. And
So I saw, thank you for the answer on the databases there on the VM. Did you have to rewrite any of the databases from non-populational to or you only use?
No, there is no code rewrite for the databases. We use the same databases, but up to date. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very
Thank you very much.